Ian had a job. He quit it. He's been on his own now for over 4 years, and he's very discretionary where he spends his time, with the exception of this podcast. But like,
that is so true. It is so true. God, I would think that'd be a demerit against me in raising money. Like, why do you do that?
He's handsome and funny every once in a while.
Yeah.
But so Ian is incredibly discretionary in where he spends his time. So when he came to me and said, I'm going to put 3 to 5 years of my life into this, this is someone who's a very highly compensated executive level person who walked away from tens of millions of dollars because he valued time. So if you see someone like that who values their time enough to invest it into something, there's something there. So what I think is critical is this, like, for those of you that are listening, like, it matters who you hang around with. It matters where you go to work and who is employed there. That's how Ian and I met. That's how Ian and David met. That a lot of these things are relationships over time. Who do I raise money from? People I've worked with, people who raised me, people who are in my network, people who see me go to work every single day, and typically people who start very small. Here's a couple of $100,000 I've performed. A couple of $100,000 becomes $500,000. $500,000 becomes $1 million. And it's those things.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God here.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you son of a bitch.
Hey, buddy.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good today. We are just wrapping up. Our last wires are hitting, my man, on our latest fundraising round for Keep Technologies, our technology startup. So pretty exciting that it's kind of like herding cats at the end, just like it was for us when we raised money on real estate deals. Is no different. Lots of text follow-ups. Hey, did you send the wire? Hey, could you sign that sub agreement we sent you 3 times? Lots of that going on right now. And Paxson is in the deal, and he was very well behaved, I must say.
Well, that's good.
I feel like he's trying very hard to stay off of our podcast. So he did a good job.
The last time you raised money for Keep, how much did you raise last time?
The first fundraising round was $4 million.
So for $4 million, I put in 250, but I wasn't smart. I gave some of it up to some people.
Schnitzeled away.
Yeah, I wanted to be nice to people. So I ended up, I was like third from last to have my wire in. And Ian was like, I hate to call you. I know you're kind of busy. You just had a baby, but we send that wire. And I became the Mark Zupan of that. He was always dead last and contributing to us. And this time I still haven't sent it, but I think Carl's sending it Friday. So we'll get that in. But
you're late, buddy.
I was like, what is it? The end of the year? He's like, no. It's, this week. Like one of my buddies
used to working on 30-day cycles. I'll get it to you by the end of the month.
30-day cycle, 75.
End of the month. Hey, right. First off, tell all of our listeners what your dad said the first time you saw him after you got him to put a little schnitzel into the first deal.
Every time I just saw my dad twice in the last month. He always asked me, how's that thing going with Ian? Is that thing gone tits up yet?
Hey, Frank, man, we're going to lose our ass on this technology company we bought.
He never asked lose your ass. He goes, this thing on tits up. So let's do this, Ian. What is Keep Technologies? We've talked about it here before, but let's give us a quick overview.
Yeah. So we are rebranding actually to Keep Vehicle Monitoring, similar to, what Simply Safe would do for a home. We have, we're a hardware and a monitoring company, and that we have a device that plugs into a cup holder. It's got 15 or 16 now accepted utility patents. And the device is very similar to what Ring does for home security. It has multiple sensors. It has a camera. And so if you get close to a car, if you're a thief, it is going to warn you by chirping at you and flashing bright lights. And if you open the door, a loud ass alarm is going to go off, and a camera will start to roll. and you will be notified as the owner of the car on your mobile, where you can see a live look-in of who is messing with your car. It also has a GPS, and we offer different monitoring packages, just like you would with, a home security system.
So just for those of you that are listening and not watching, would it protect the Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, and Hank Aaron cards that are over your left shoulder if they're in your office?
I can tell, not in the office. But
in the car.
But if I leave those cards, which by the way, I've left those cards on the counter because I like to remind Frank that my collection, I'm starting with a much bigger head start than he is. So I put 3 of my.
He was born on third and telling me he's hit a triple.
I hit a triple being born on third. If I left those cars in my car, I would feel a lot better, and I would certainly be notified if someone got close to my car in doing it. So we've been. David really came up with the idea about 4 years ago, but we've been all in on this thing for 3 years. We seeded it first, then 2 years ago, we closed on the first capital round. And now we are to a point where we are shipping our first 250 devices to pre-order customers we've been taking. We have about 50,000 in pre-order revenue, and we'll be shipping those devices in December. This round that we just raised, Frank, is to run a production run of 3,000 units. Market them, sell them, ship them, and obviously to continue our payroll along before we take out a big raise with venture capital.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about this. Where are we in product development?
So product development, the product is sweet. So we have production units right now that we've been testing with all of our employees. And it's we're kind of our last pieces right now are just in working with our manufacturing partner to be able to ship products out. So our manufacturing partner is in Taiwan, and we're following up on the last bits and pieces of getting the production cycle finished, and kind of our last. We've got 10,000 lines of code written. Our app is complete. Product is pretty much ready to go here in about 60 days, ready to ship, and then from there, Frank, like we're going to use those 250 early users to give feedback. What features did you like? What you wish it had? That kind of stuff.
I want to get into the into that in a second. So we're going to talk a little bit about early adopters, but there's been a major process, right? Like you wanted to ship these units. I want to go through this really quickly because I think this is fascinating. When were you initially supposed to ship your first units? What happened with the supply chain? And then what happened with the supply chain? What did you end up doing with your pre-orders? And then I want you to talk about like how you specifically like used the phone and what that reaction was like. Because I've told people the story, they couldn't believe it.
So there have been two major delays for us. So when we first took the $4 million, we were running to try to ship some products by the following December. So like 15 months from that would have been last December. And we got to the spring and it was getting to a place where we weren't really proud of the product we were going to ship in December. And we were asking ourselves, like, why was December so important? And it was like, well, we kind of told our investors we were going to do it, but it was like, well, we didn't tell our investors we were going to ship a crappy product either. And it was really, that whole challenge was just engineering. We were having to cut too many features out to get the product ready to send to people. So when we started taking pre-orders right around Black Friday of last year, we told people we would ship in July. That was the whole thing. And we got to around April, May, and it just became really clear that our engineering challenges were just too great to be able to ship in July. Like we didn't have enough time to get the product complete, to have it produced. There were some supply chain issues in there, but really it just came down to the fact that the engineering was more challenging than we had anticipated. And so we had to go back to those 250 customers and say, look, July's not happening. It's going to be December. We need 6 more months. And incredibly, Frankie, out of that group, only 3 people have canceled out of that whole group, which is awesome. That goes to show you the power of early adopters and people that early on the innovation curve. They're used to waiting. They're used to doing Kickstarters and kind of buying pre-order products. But I talked to every one of those customers personally. I called every one of them on their cell phone. And some of these people would talk to me for 30 minutes about how much crime is in their area, why they liked our product. We got a ton of good feedback. And I think we got some goodwill by being honest with people and talking on the phone.
So there's a few things here that I wanted to talk about. I think is really fascinating. What we're talking about today is not the key process. Like I'm really interested to talk about like the cost, because the cost had come up and it's come back down, but that's not what we're doing on this particular podcast. We'll talk about that later. What I want to drive in instead is how you raise money and how you do it easily. And what Ian did that I think is fascinating is he physically called these owners or these purchasers himself. Ian literally picked up the phone, had 250 people to call, was lamenting like, oh man, I just don't know if these people are going to yell, scream at me or what. He physically called himself. And when he introduced himself as an officer in the company, the reaction he got was incredible. What was the reaction like when people knew that who you were?
Oh yeah. I mean, you want them to know, like we appreciate, because I really do. David and I both, David is our founder, a brilliant guy. This was his idea. This was his baby. He just started an idea. And then you get people sending you money. And so when you get those first customers, Frank, you know how that is. Man, you are really appreciative. You want to make them happy. You want to do everything. So I felt like it was important. And David reached out to a number of people too, say, hey, look, a co-founder is calling you. I'm an equity owner in this company. I want you to know that we take this serious and we're sorry that we didn't get it out. And people were great. They were like, we're so happy with what you're doing. But I think more than anything, they bought based on, an Instagram ad or a Google ad that we ran. And they bought credit card on their phone. And then here they are getting a phone, like no one ever calls anyone anymore when you buy stuff online. And so just getting that call made them feel important, but then asking questions about why they bought, what's going on. You could see people felt more comfortable that this is a real company. If I'd have sent texts or emails, I think a lot of people would have canceled, but talking to them, a lot of them would say like, where's your office based? How many people? Well, we have, 6, 7 engineers working on this, different in Atlanta. And you'd tell them the story and they'd be like, that's really cool. And you can kind of tell them the founder story. I think people like being in on something new also. I think they, like to say, if we do make it big, they could say, I was one of the first buyers of that product. I think this type of person likes that.
There's a side of it for the buyer of the product, but what we're driving at today is the investor, right? The person who feels comfortable putting money in with you. Like I'm going to be in for well over $300,000, which is not an insignificant amount of money for most people. But you pick up the phone and actually making that call, it stands out. And I think it's going to relate to something I'm going to ask a little bit later. I'll tell a quick story. I have a friend of mine who, a dear friend, our family went and stayed with him and his wife in Colorado earlier this year. And he likes bourbon. And he likes bourbon that you can't buy at the store anymore. So I went on the internet and I bought him 2 bottles of bourbon. It cost me $800 to buy 2 bottles of bourbon. I ordered it July 7th. It still isn't here. And not only is it not here, the website is now closed down. And now it's like take all. So basically they stole my $800 and now it's like go through Shopify. And like this is a fucking fool's errand. There's like, I got robbed. I got robbed of $800. And what I think is unique here is the owners of the company, like the owners of this company just fleeced me. But for a product that costs 1/4 as much, one of the owners, who's a busy guy, literally called and wasn't in a rush. And like Ian told me stories about speaking with this woman who's a bartender whose car's gotten broken into in Florida several times. Like it was really unique. Like when you were done with those phone calls, what did you feel?
Oh, it's fun. It's, because in today's world with direct to consumer, D2C, so much of your orders can come without ever having talked to a customer. And especially on, it's a $200 product, it's now $300. For a product like that, you're not used to talking to someone. So for us, it was really great because David and I got a lot of intel on who was buying, what kind of cars they owned, what kind, how many were used cars, how many were new cars, how many were expensive cars. I learned about whether they'd ever been broken in for. We learned about business owners. So for me, here's what I'll tell you, Frank. Like you, I have a lot of money into this deal and I'm raising money. So unlike you, like for you, you have a couple people, I'm sure you're worried about, I hope my dad makes money in this. You brought some friends in on it. You want them to make money. So you feel a little bit of that. I've raised now, I don't know, $3 or $4 million from my friends and family alone, people that my reputation matters to me. So for me, when you ask me how I felt after talking to them, I felt like we were on the right track. I felt like we were putting the right solution together. I felt like, so I think any startup owner needs to do this. You need to test your idea. Why did you buy? What did you think of the price? What do you think about the monitoring costs that we're thinking of? So every conversation I had just reaffirmed we're tackling the right problem and we have the right solution.
So we talk a lot about investing, and what I think it makes a lot of sense is you got a horse and you got a jockey, right? The horse in this instance is the product. The jockeys are Ian and David, who are people that have incredible reputations, that take things seriously. And one of the things that I told the people that I invested with the first time around, I brought them in, right? I said, hey, do you want to put some of your hard-earned money into this deal? When there was a product delay, I just shared with them. I said, Ian physically called all 250 of these early adapters himself. They're like, seriously? How long did that take them? Like, it took them like 2 weeks. They're like, no shit. I'm like, so I think that
longer than that, because a lot of people don't call you back. It was like 4 weeks, 5 weeks to get through. Because I called them all, but you're waiting on phone calls back, right? Returning
the total amount of time, but the phone time was a couple of weeks worth of work to physically talk to human beings and do that. But I think this matters, and it matters this way. So Ian and I were talking about, like, should we do this? And a couple of weeks ago, we did an episode about me. And like, I couldn't sleep because I have an overhead that's just about $700,000. So most normal people don't have that kind of overhead. And Ian thought it was interesting.
I joked with Frankie. I said, most people wake up in the middle of the night thinking, did I leave the back door open? Frank wakes up in a panic, remembering that he has a $700,000 overhead. Holy, my payroll. It's a recession. I wake up. I'm like, when Ian Mathews wakes up in the middle of the night, I'm like, did I leave this stove on? Did I leave that on? I'm going to go check. Not Frank. 700,000 of overhead monthly.
So like, to someone like me who has a huge overhead, I've raised a bunch of money. And I remember there was like an article written in the local business paper about someone who raised like $1.2 million. Like, I can do that in a text message. But most things that I do when I raise capital is I raise it on a fixed asset where someone has a deed of trust. So basically they have a mortgage. And if I got eaten by a shark, well, they gave me $1 million, but it's tied to this particular building. And then it becomes their building through foreclosure. So I have to perform.
You have a floor. So, with real estate, that because I've raised money with you, for you, from myself on real estate, I can say the land's probably worth this. Here's what the building is. It generates this kind of revenue. I got this lease, which is an asset, and here's other things in the area. So we could lose money on it, but there's kind of a floor because you have these assets that you could always liquidate and give everyone their money back. Whereas in a company, the floor is zero.
This is a tech startup, and this is speculative. So it could go wrong. It could go very wrong. Like in my instance, most things won't come back to zero because it's back with earth and it's back with a building with a structure on it. And if the structure got burned down, we have insurance. So we're going to get most of it.
Tits up on a bad real estate deal. When we joke about tits up, it's like you lose 30%. That's as bad as it could get, really, unless you just bought horribly.
Or you just don't do anything and you just collect a coupon every month from rents. Yeah. So I know how to raise money into a fixed asset. I'm really good at it. Like I've at one point I had literally $15 million out private, like that, which is a shitload of money.
Yeah.
But I've never conjured up or gotten people behind kind of a figment of imagination. Like we think it's going to be something, but the first raise was something that was concept. And the second raise, we're almost ready to produce a product. So what I think is really fascinating is this, because I don't know it. What's the difference? And you kind of alluded to it, but I want you to get into it. What's the difference between how you raise money with me and how you have to raise money here? And then how did you do it? Like, how'd you sell the vision? How'd you show people like this? Because some of the people that invested with you, like besides like our parents, are older. Like the technology's got to be confusing. So how did you paint the picture?
Yeah. So the first round, the challenge was we barely had a working prototype. So when people say, when you ask for money, people say, what are you going to do with the money?
Right.
And that first $4 million, it was like all engineering. And you and I know, Frank, engineering, you could spend $4 million of engineering and not get anything, right? Like, well, I guess we couldn't invent it, right? Like, think about all the money spent trying to invent the first engine, the first combustion engine, or the first light bulb, right? And if that hadn't have been commercialized, that could have just been poof. You spend money on salaries. So that was the big risk of, we have to invent this and it has to work. And that's what I think I remember telling you this, like, I feel very strongly that there's a big problem, that there's not a product like this. The risk is, can we do all the things that we're setting out to do? Because we've not invented this yet. We've kind of got bits and pieces of it working on a prototype, but that 2 years was going to be spent on engineering, and to a little extent, obviously building a team to do that, and to a little extent proving the market. Because at the time we raised $4 million, we had not advertised anything. We'd not done it. Now, we had done some primary market research, and that is valuable, where you go out, you pay a third party to survey people and ask about what they would pay for a product and security, that kind of stuff. But until people start putting their credit card down, you don't really know. And so those things we had to prove with the 4 million. With the second, Frankie.
Hold on, stop right 1 second. You raised the 4 million when? And then you raised a new round how for
2 years ago.
Okay. So 2 years ago was concept. In those 2 years, a lot of things have happened. We have a product. We've had coronavirus. We've gone up and down in pricing, but we're less than 90 days away from shipping units now. So we've gone from something conceptual to we've taken concept to reality, and reality is it's in Ian's car. I've seen it. In addition to being in Ian's car, it's in everybody else that works at Keeps cars. They're testing it, and it's about to go to that early adapter market in the next 60 to 90 days.
Yep. So since then, in that 2 years, the bulk of our progress that I'm very proud of is the work David and Jonathan, he's our CTO, and our engineering team. They're incredible. Like, they've literally invented a product that's never been done before. It's got a cellular module in it. It's an iPhone without a phone in it. I mean, it connects to you. It's got sensors that have to pick things up back and forth. The alarm had to be honed in just right. The devil's in the details of how this works. But you're right. It's in my device. So when I talk to a potential investor now, I can say, this damn thing works. When I walk up, it chirps at me. And I can tell you, the installation took me 2 minutes. It's absolutely smooth. The app is beautiful the way it's working. I couldn't say any of that because I didn't know if we could pull it off 2 years ago. I believe in the product now. Our challenge is just getting the production out there and testing on a mass level. So it's when I talk to people now, and I don't even know if it's pitching when you invest, it's just offering an opportunity to get in. I try to, like, these are people that I care about. If this weren't to work, I want them to know, here's all the risks that I worry about. Here's the risk of how you could lose money. I want everyone to know that. But now when I talk about I think we've de-risked the product side. Our product works. And I think we've de-risked understanding if there's a market for our product because of what we've done with our marketing and our direct to consumer. We know there's a market for it. And we know we can acquire customers much lower cost than we have, because we're getting people to buy this thing knowing they're going to have to wait 6, 7, 8 months to get it. Imagine what's going to happen when we can ship the thing in 2 days. Because right now on our website, we're like, hey, you're just a pre-order. You'll get it months from now. Most people aren't into that. So I'm able to tell people, here were the risks at 4 million. I think we've taken them off the table. Here's the current risks that we're facing. One of which being it's a recession, and, can people afford to pay this? We feel pretty good about some of the payment options we're doing, but that's how I approached a lot of people of what we were going to do. And we went out to get $2.5 million. That $2.5 million now, it's a very clear path. I can tell you, it's kind of muddy saying, well, it's engineering, the 4 million, right? That was harder, especially for some of the people that know nothing about tech, that are older. Like, well, what does engineering mean? Well, it's electrical, it's programming, it's coding. You're getting over their head a little bit, but it's basically, we got to build this product. Now we're going to go manufacture the devices. It costs X. We're going to get 3,000 and we're going to market the hell out of them. So advertising costs, marketing, shipping, and we're going to sell these and get $1 million of revenue. And that's going to take us to our next big venture capital raise. So for me, it's a kind of a clear path, Frank, of what we're going to spend this $2.5 million on. Much clearer than the first time. And I would say about half the people that got in on this raise were in on the first round. So they were just as excited to get in, but we wanted to bring other people in who missed the first raise. So we brought a lot of different people into this deal, because I kind of look at it as more investors is better than less. There's more people out there that can help us
bigger network.
that are out there selling it, telling people about it, right? Versus.
So this is interesting. The first time you raise capital, what was your collateral like? You need a pitch deck when you raise money. And then what was different about your pitch deck the second time?
Yeah, so that's an awesome question. So if you remember the initial decks, they were 3D renderings of what the product could look like.
I remember.
Right. And when we went through at that time, we had no website. We had no social media following. Today we go out and we say, go to our Instagram, go read all the comments of people engaging. We have 6,000 followers on Instagram and they're an engaged group. They're into it. We have, I don't know, 3x that on TikTok. Our YouTube page continues to grow. I think we have 1,500 people following and they engage in all of it. We can show you videos of our product working, demos at the CES conference that we went to where people loved it. So what was different about our collateral, Frankie, is I could show you real customers spending money, interacting with it, the product working. It went from concept, a bunch of things that we drew in CAD on a computer, to actual real videos and pictures of the product doing its job, doing what we said it was going to do, and real customers engaging and interacting with us. That was by far the biggest difference from the two raises in being able to communicate where we were in our mission.
Without naming them, there was a difficult person, not necessarily difficult. He was skeptical the first time. It's an older guy that we talk about privately quite a bit who has enough money to fund this whole thing. He was super skeptical the first time. And then who was your most skeptical person the second time? And like compare and contrast those two people, or was there very little skepticism the second time?
See, what's interesting. So the first time there was a lot of skepticism. There were more people that said no because because of the collateral, it was all, you had to use your imagination. Yeah. The second time we had accomplished a lot of the hardest part, in my opinion, which was building a product out of nowhere. I think that's 90% of the work we've done the last 2 years is David's engineering team figuring it out and doing it. So I think the second time I didn't get as much. And honestly, there was a lot of open interest. And part of this is what I think is worth talking about a little bit. When you do a real estate deal, it's not like you call someone and have to say, hey, I'm Frank, I buy residential real estate. These are people that just ongoing know that you are consistently buying and making good decisions. A lot of the people on my list have known I've been working on this. So they're friends of mine that I talk to on a regular basis that ask, how's that tech company of yours going? I share with them a video. I show them something. Maybe they listen to this podcast and we've talked about it before. There's a bunch of people like that were interested and told me, if you guys ever raise money again, like almost like when we started de-risking it, they started seeing it as less and less of a risky play. And they saw my enthusiasm growing as we were selling it, that they were like, oh, it's a little different. You're a little farther along, that I would be willing to invest. And so people have been starting to tell me over the past year, hey, if you do that again, I would like to get in. So I had that list sort of in my head that I can't really think of someone on this round that gave me a hard time, because I would have just said, look, it doesn't sound like it's for you. I wasn't in a world where I really I felt like I had to sell much harder, even with you on the 4 million, of here's where we're at, here's the things we've thought about, here's what I'm worried about, than this round.
So let's get into this a little bit. Like, I'm not a business guy. I'm a real estate guy. But I didn't go to Harvard. I don't have an MBA. So this is probably stuff that people with MBAs or went to Harvard or smarter than me understand very well, but I don't. So at some point we need to do a podcast on, there was a book called Accidental Billionaires, and it was remade as The Social Network. But in The Social Network, what happened in that movie is Mark Zuckerberg, it's a movie, but it's kind of how it played out. What they did is they with very nefarious means, they actually delevered several people on purpose, and they kind of diluted their stock down in order to basically push them out. But the point of it is, like, I really didn't understand that until I read that book and until I saw the movie. So in layman's terms, what they do is there's an initial offering, there's an initial value. And then whenever you want to raise more money, you need to go through and kind of restructure what you're building, so you have an asset that you're borrowing against. So what I would love is some clarity on how you raise money the first time, what the value was based on, how the money was raised the second time, like where how did the equity come about? And, how was it levered? Like, are the people in the first time getting a better deal than the people that are getting the second time? Is it even? Like, where did the equity come from? And how did you structure? Because I think it's complicated. And I think people will really be interested in how that works.
So the first $4 million, we raised it from private capital. So people cut us a check or wire money, and they get a piece of the business. And that gives them a certain percentage in the company. And we value the company at $16 million. And I mean, anyone that argues valuation at that point, it's, you try to go with comps in the market. I think I remember Ring had raised something similar to 4 million and a 16 million valuation, but we had multiple comps of saying it's kind of the way tech works. It's a fast growing company. So it's an aggressive multiple on what we think we can be. And obviously the founder, David's the founder. He's the one that put a lot of his seed capital, sweat equity into it. He came up with the idea. So he's going to have a large percentage of the company. And the idea is that's probably going to get whittled down over time as you raise more and more money. So we had this initial bank of $4 million that was in. So that's, 25% of the company. And I had percentages of the company as a co-founder with David and a seed investor and someone that was helping him promote the round. This time around, a little bit unique what David did, because the engineering had gone slower than he had expected to. He felt very strongly that he was going to give up this slice of equity. He was going to give it to the new investors. So the 2.5 we were raising, it's 10% we keeping our valuation the same. So 16 million pre with the 4 million, it's a $20 million valued company. But what David did is he gave 10% of his equity up and gave it to the new investors. And what that means is the initial investors that went in on that 4 million were not diluted. And he did that to not dilute those investors because, like David, those are his friends and family and his brand matters. And David has a very big percentage of the company as it is. He felt like it was the right thing to do. And that was his decision. I had no stake on that. He made that decision himself, and he felt strongly about it. So none of the initial investors were diluted. David diluted himself. Now, when we go raise some venture capital to grow this company to $200, $300, $400 million valuation, which is our goal, you have to go take out 10, 20, $30 million swaths of money from either venture capital, or at some point you can get creative with debt. But you need to get creative with debt. Frankie, it's similar to, getting a mortgage. You have to show you had income, you had profits, you can't do debt early on. It's venture capital. And they'll want percentage of the business. So that means everyone will get diluted when we go to venture capital. But we've told everyone that from the get-go. Yeah, your percentage of the company goes down, but the idea is you're adding to the total enterprise value of the company over that time.
I think Ian did a good job of explaining that, but I'm going to explain it back my way, and maybe it'll be clear for those that don't completely understand it. Concept first, very little value at the first raise. They use anecdotal data from other companies, and they came up with where they were in the process versus where the current multiples were. They thought if they could raise $4 million, the company had a $16 million valuation. The $4 million plus the $16 million is a $20 million company based upon kind of where they hope to be. We are still in the hope to be phase. So what David did is he took some of his equity and he made it common stock. And if he was to add the value, so the company still has a $20 million value, some of that came from David's pie, so they didn't have to take the value of the company up to dilute the other members. So everybody in the deal is still getting the same. So the people who are actually getting in now are still early adopters. People like me are like re-upping, right? We're getting a little bit bigger portion of the company. But we didn't get rewarded by being early, but the people coming in now, they get penalized either. So there's different ways in that. And then when we go to the next round, which is the VC round, this is what happens. All right, we're bringing in VC, but if VC brings in their money, the $20 million company now becomes a $50, a $75, $100 million company. So again, there's going to be more common stock, but at the same time, the value has gone exponential up because of the addition of, it's going to be a strategic partner with money. We can talk about some of the strategic partners that Ian and David are talking about, but that's how this process works. In real estate, I buy things based upon what as low as I can buy it. I know what the current market value is. I try to be under that when I acquire. And then I know with value add, it can be more. This is the same process. It's a concept versus a piece of real estate, but the process is identical.
It's layers of risk, and what are you willing to pay for the capital? So when you're a startup, like the first $4 million round, that's like angel investing, right? It's friends and family. It's a funding round. It's really risky. We're saying we're going to try to invent a brand new product, and we think we can do it in X time with this amount of money, and we think people will buy it. Okay, so if I'm an initial investor on that, I'm buying David, and I'm buying me to another extent of being able to, and I guess when they're buying me, they're probably buying more of, I trust the network that Ian usually hangs out with. So if it's someone that didn't know David and I'm saying, trust me, I've worked with them a long time. But that's a lot of, do I believe in the operators to go execute on a good idea that I like the idea? The second time, so again, I think I don't know, you tell me, it feels less risky this second time because I'm like, Frankie, I've sold 50,000 of it. And look, the damn thing works. It's in my truck, dude. It works good. Like, it had to have felt a little less risky for you to send me a wire on this one than the first one.
So why don't you ask me that question? Why does it feel less risky to me? It's not that you've convinced 250 people on the internet to write you a check for $200. Like, that almost means nothing to me. It really does. Like, the fact that there's 250 people who are willing to buy something that they've never seen before is not a proof source I'm going to latch onto. I do like the fact that there are some sales and there is a market, but if there's only 250 buyers, that to me means very little. Like, I don't know. But the things that do matter to me are this: the text messages back and forth about different things that you've shown me about the device. And hey, I don't like this piece. There was like a cord that comes through that I don't like. Ian goes, oh, that's a real thing. And he literally stopped what he was doing and he wrote it down, and they've addressed it. The fact that it's in Ian's car, Ian's a pain in the ass to deal with. I split a cow with him and his wife, and I still don't hear about how shitty the cow was. Like, if Ian is going to embrace a product and he's excited about a product, I know he has a very high bar. So for me, when my dad asked me, and my dad put 50K in, which is not an insignificant amount of money to a man who's an electrician that doesn't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like it's like Ian's dad buying baseball cards. Like, this is a big investment, right? I can say, Dad, Ian's got it in his car. Oh, Ian's using it. The whole company's using it. They're proof sourcing it that way. They're making changes to it. You guys sat down with Shaq, and Shaq was like, instead of the car holder or the cup holder, why don't you do it in the rearview mirror? And like, that's version 2. Like, we're so much further along. And what I see is this, and I'll get into this in kind of my wrap. I want to invest in companies that are adapting. Like, when you manage people, in a lot of instances, when you manage people, it's this: there's people who want to get shit done, and there's people who want to be right. You guys want to get shit done. You guys want to get in there and you want to build a product. You want it to be right, but you're not like, this must be the product because this is how it started. You're adapting. And what I see and feel is a product that's better than I thought it was going to be based on when I first invested to now. That's who I want. That's the right jockey. That's who you want to ride, because there's iteration, there's smart thought, there's process, it's properly managed. Like, those are the things that I'm starting to see and feel. Like, the product isn't even out yet, but there's multiple things that are different than we thought they were going to be a couple of years ago, because this is a better answer. And that gets exciting.
Yeah. And I think, Frankie, with raising capital, I think so much of it is gut and less about science, especially when you come down to something like this. So a number of people that I've raised money from have been in real estate deals with me, and I've always paid them on time, and I've always done what I said I was going to do. There's a large number of people in here that have worked with me in some capacity at one of my companies or somewhere else. So I think my personal brand matters there, that they see I'm a hard worker and I don't go into anything half-ass, and that when I tell you I'm going to do something, I normally do it. I'm normally someone that cares a lot about how other people feel about my word. And so they have some of that halo that you get of, I've worked with him before. He's someone, like, if you're going to invest in something like this, I'm personally someone that would rather invest in someone I know or trust. That's why I'm invested so heavily with this, because I feel the same way about David. He's an incredibly smart guy and he works his ass off. But I'd also say I have an advantage. I live in a town that has very high discretionary income. I live in one of the richer towns in the country. And so what does that mean? I coach. There are at least 5 people in this deal that have given me $100,000 whose kid I have coached before in baseball or soccer or something else. So these are folks that interact with me all the time. They know that, and it's kind of, if you have discretionary money, if I'm willing to trust someone to be around my kid all the time, I'm probably willing to trust money with them too, if they seem like someone that makes good decisions. So if you're raising the money, do you have a good idea? One, do people think the idea is good? So I couldn't go raise money because I coached your kid and I had a shitty idea. Like that wouldn't happen. So the idea still has to be good. They have to believe in it. 2, does the promoter have a track record of making good decisions with my own money and in my career? Am I someone who surrounds myself with people? And I think, Frankie, it's no different than when I go raise money. When I raised money for your real estate date, there were a bunch of people that never heard of Frank Cava, but they also know that I don't hang around with jackasses and I don't invest in people that aren't of the same cloth that I am. And I think it's probably you felt the same way about David. Like if I go get David to go invest in Westwood, he didn't know you from Adam. David Moeller invested in your real estate deal. What does David know? I don't surround myself with idiots. Like I don't. I only work with people that I trust. He cut me a check. I didn't think twice. I did not have to sell him. He's like, "Are you in?" I'm like, "I'm in. I'm in large." He's like, "I'm in," that fast. A little bit of you was, you knew if I thought this highly of David, he's probably a pretty talented dude and I wouldn't put my time and money into it.
So I think we're going to get to a point of wrapping unless we miss something, but I want to say something quickly. Ian had a job. He quit it. He's been on his own now for over 4 years, and he's very discretionary where he spends his time, with the exception of this podcast. But like,
that is so true. It is so true. God, I would think that'd be a demerit against me in raising money. Like, why do you do that?
He's handsome and funny every once in a while.
Yeah.
But so Ian is incredibly discretionary where he spends his time. So when he came to me and said, "I'm going to put 3 to 5 years of my life into this," this is someone who's a very highly compensated executive level person who walked away from tens of millions of dollars because he valued time. So if you see someone like that who values their time enough to invest it into something, there's something there. So what I think is critical is this, like for those of you that are listening, like it matters who you hang around with. It matters where you go to work and who is employed there. That's how Ian and I met. That's how Ian and David met. That a lot of these things are relationships over time. Who do I raise money from? People I've worked with, people who raised me, people who are in my network, people who see me go to work every single day, and typically people who start very small. Here's a couple of $100,000 I've performed. A couple of $100,000 becomes $500,000. $500,000 becomes $1 million. And it's those things. So there's a few things that I think are critical as we kind of get to a wrapping point. You invest in people you believe in. One of the reasons I think Ian is incredibly great at raising money and why I bring him into deals, and I usually have to give him a little bit of extra sweetener to get him in because he does value his time, but he's great at communication. And what we do together, he typically makes fun of me in our communication, but we do a quarterly communication and everything that we do together, and people know where they stand in the deals. And I'll get a bunch of texts like, "Oh, that Ian's so funny." But the point is they know where they stand. And then you have to have reach. Right now, the reach is smaller because it's only 20 million with 6 million raised. It's going to get bigger. And when we get to that point, we'll have a different conversation. We'll probably bring David on because then you're going to have to raise money a slightly different way. The foundation is the same, but who you're raising it with and that relationship will change. But those are 3 of the really big things that I think are critical whenever it is that you want to raise money.
And so, you asked a little bit earlier on how much do I sell? What I would say is that on the initial one, I did a little bit. On this round, I did 0 selling. And really, I didn't want anyone in here who wasn't excited. I just didn't. I didn't want someone texting me every month, "How's things? Where's sales?" What's like, One, I needed to know that if you were putting in 50 or 100, or someone put in 500, if you're putting a lot of money in, was it a lot of money to you? Like, were you going to be nervous about it? Were you going to be asking, how do I get it back in a year or two? It couldn't be money you needed in the next 4 or 5 years. I wouldn't put someone in where I felt like this was stretching them past their point of they should be investing. Are they accredited for something like this?
Let's stop right there. You and I have done multiple deals together, and there's 16 people in the Westwood Holdings portfolio. A couple of people we talked to, it was like they were trying to scrape together some cash, and we're like, this might not be the right thing for you.
Or the right time.
Correct. And I had someone in this deal who was like, we had a 250 minimum. And I could tell 250 was a stress point. So I've raised money before. I don't want someone calling me every day or every week or every month. Like, I pay those people back and I replace it with someone with more patient money. But when we asked that person, and like Ian and I talked about this, and this is literally a real estate deal we're doing right now. It's like, why don't we take you down from 250 to 100? We'll share it together. We'll package you with a few others and get that to 250, get to the minimum. But if it was 100 and not, so like, this is critical. Who you raise money from matters. And they need to understand what they're getting into, what the expectation is. And when we say to them, we're going to communicate with you quarterly, you do it. You tell them what's happening. This is the time frame. You set the right expectation. You communicate and you deliver when you say you're going to deliver, and you stay on track. Most people have forgotten 90 days ago. We wrote them a check. They're going to get another check in 10 days from us on schedule. It shows up on the 21st. An email will go out. And that is how you can do a small raise that becomes an enormous raise over time. Because if you look at it, Ian, the same people that are in this deal twice and in the deal with me, 4.5, 4, just under 3, right? That's 12 million bucks from basically yours and mine's concentric circles. That's how it was raised. And you do that because you have a track record.
Yeah. And I think it's important when you raise that you talk about the skin in the game you have. So
yes,
anyone who's thinking about putting money in, I say, look, I got my own money in and I could get burned too. I could be wrong. I could lose all this. I want everyone to know this is a tech startup. It could go to zero. Now, I think there's a floor because of our patents, because of this. I think we've thought through that risk. But I almost, with friends and family, Frankie, I'm almost telling you all the stuff I'm worried about more than I'm telling you all the positives, because I don't want you to look back if something went wrong and we were just terribly wrong about this and be like, man, you sold that so hard. Like I want you to know everything I'm worried about and that everyone else is worried about. So we're all understanding we got into this. There's a very high ceiling and this is going to be an exciting ride. But let me tell you, it's a roller coaster, a tech startup, and there's going to be some lows where we're freaking out a little bit. So I want that to be there. I want you to know I skin in the game, and I don't want you in here if you're going to be really stressed. I had a few where it kind of went back and forth, and they were asking about could you load, and it was like, you know what, maybe the timing's just not right. Awesome, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, people have their money put in different places and whatever, but I think that's important. Now, as the last thing I'll just say is there's tranches of this. So Frank and I can go raise $4 million for a real estate deal. But if Frank and I wanted to go raise $40 million for a real estate deal, we're not going to the same people. Frank and I are going to professional money, and they do care about our track record to an extent, but it's much less personal. So that's what
I was talking about earlier with the VC. It's a whole different conversation when we go to that next level.
That's when metrics matter. So 4 million, that's based on relationships. Do I trust these guys? Do they have a good track record? 2.5 million, same, right? We got more than 2.5. We went to 2.8. We probably could have done 4 or 5. We'd have really pushed, but we got that. The next will be venture capital. We're going to fly out to California, meet with a bunch of people in Silicon Valley, and they are not going to give a damn that we're good coaches in baseball and we're good dads and we have a good track record of being hard workers. They're going to ask about our sales, our acquisition costs, our lifetime revenue on average out of a customer, what our bill of material is, what our metrics now matter. It's the same as buying a stock. You're not asking all the questions you ask here. It's you want to know about revenue, profit, earnings. So with every tranche of either debt or equity that we go to take after this, the metrics will keep getting more and more and more important, Frank. So for this raise that we just took, we got to go show that we sold $1 million of product and our acquisition cost was realistic and it made sense and people are paying for the service, period. There's no more, we're good guys and we work hard and we have a good track record. Our goal is to kick ass in the next 12 months, then go to venture capital and raise 10 to 20 million. And
there's a horse and
you have to have metrics.
There's a horse and a jockey. The jockey got us this far. The jockey is the relationships, the communication, the things that we talked about, the baseball coaching. That's the jockey. The horse is going to become the product, and it's going to become the real thing that wins the race, which takes us to where we hope to get to, which is an exit where someone buys it. And that is the VC stuff. And that comes down, there's no heart. That is a heartless, fact-based sale. Like I work with someone now who's in the process of trying to sell their business or a portion of their business to VCs. What VCs do is it's basic. Like someone said to me, they're like, "Oh, it's equity. We can default on it. And there's no recourse." I'm like, go default and see how little recourse there is. There's absolutely recourse. They're going to come find you whatever banana tree you're laying under, and they're going to ask you for their money back. And it's not going to end until you get it back or they got a piece of your ass. So like these are high stakes. And what you're doing right now, this is really interesting. I never really thought of it in these terms, but this is the typical story. This is how every story starts. Jeff Bezos started no different. The money he got to start Amazon
from his dad,
people he went to college with, people he worked with, and his parents.
Steve Jobs gave him like 3 rounds. Remember we read
that's
that?
Right.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, same thing. And the reason you raise it from friends and family first is they are the most willing to give. They believe in Ian. They coached Ian in baseball. They see Ian every day, so they trust him. But there's another side of it that's actually critical. They're willing to trust and step back and let things marinate and grow. If Ian had VC money, he would have had pressure and timing. And pressure and timing may have made them made a bad decision. Ian may not have been able to call all 250 of those clients. They may have had to push that product out 6 months early, and it was a worse product because they had this ticking time bomb behind them. What they did is they set this up smart. They set that it's the right people in the deal who aren't antsy about the investment. And that gives this enough time to marinate, to properly be cultured and grown. And then it goes to that point, but not too soon, because that could ruin it.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I mean, it's just, you don't go to venture capital right away because they won't do it. Like they just won't. We've talked about Shark Tank a few times. Shark Tank wants to know, have you shipped it? And so I think the last thing I'll just say is, as Frank was excited to see the product in my car, me using it, working. What venture capital wants to see are those 250 people saying this product is awesome. Where's your product reviews? What are customers saying about the product? How much social proof are you getting? Are they posting videos of it stopping thieves online? You can just see, Frank, take what you said about me and the other employees of Keep using the product, multiply that by 100 when objective random people that bought the product are using it and raving about it and love it. That's when the whole thing could take off. The horse and jockey. I love it. The horse is everything now. Our horse is our device, has to do what it says. It has to delight people. People have to love it. That's partly why we've delayed so long. We didn't want to put a product out that people wouldn't be crazy about, because you only get one chance to really make that impression out there.
That's right. All right. Is there anything else before I kind of get a wrap and tee you up?
No.
All right. So what I want to talk about is this. At some point in the future, there's going to be a VC conversation, and I'll probably be asking Ian questions because I've never done it. I feel very like I can't lead an interview because I just don't know how that goes. I don't do it. I do with commercial banks, but it's very, very, very different. But what I can tell you is this: in a concept, in a real estate deal, in a startup, there's a few things you must have. First, you need a product. You need a proof source. You need an audience, and you need a product that solves a problem or adds value. And if you have those things and you try to raise capital, your reputation and how you communicate matters tremendously. But that is how you can do this. So let's talk about this from a couple of different perspectives. I started what is now a $100 million real estate business with a little bit of my money, some money from my parents, and I found a few people locally who saw what I was doing, got excited about it, and lent to me. Most of that money is gone. I've got less than $10 million in private money, and I've got $40 million in public money or bank money because I've gotten more official. And I've also traded down interest rate significantly because of proof of concept. Now, these banks, I was with my son a few days ago and he goes, Dad, what are those? I had a stack of envelopes this high on my kitchen island. And I'm putting my fingers together. It was like literally like 8 inches tall of just letters. And these were all from note holders of mortgages where I was current. Like I was paying the bills and they still sent me 75 letters. So like I joked to my son, these are the mortgages I'm current on. Like they're going to come after us and there's real stakes if we don't pay. But in the beginning, I had my parents on like a balloon note with no end because I needed some forgiveness. So that's how the process goes. And if you do a good job, you pay everybody back, you build a reputation, it grows and it grows and it grows. And what we're talking about here, together, we've raised 10, 15 million bucks on a couple of different deals just by using the things that we talked about there.
Yep. I think that's all right. And I think what's fascinating is the strength of personal brands, Frank, that we talked about a little bit. We raised more than the 2.5 million. We did it in a few weeks, and we did it during a really scary time in the stock market. Stocks are cratering. The economy's kind of collapsing a little bit. We're going into a recession. Most people are nervous. But what's interesting is I thought that was going to be a problem for us. We were both a little nervous about going into this raise. It wasn't a problem at all. And part of it is people are a little bit disgusted with the stock market. So they I think a lot of people were like, if I'm going to put $100,000 into the stock market, which is falling apart, or into some people I know and trust, I'd rather probably go the other. If I'm going to lose some money, I'm losing it now in the stock market. I would rather go here. And I think there's more upside in doing this. So I think that was one lesson learned for me is I thought that was going to be a problem, the recession. It turned out it was almost the opposite for us. And if you look at most of those companies you're talking about, tech startups, a lot of them were founded during recessions, during kind of down periods. I think it's going to be a good time for us to poach some engineers from the big guys who are doing layoffs. I think it's going to be, with interest rates doing this, it's going to bring inflation down. Our input costs are going to go down. So I think for us, we're not sweating the fact that it's kind of a down market. Now, it's going to be more challenging to go to venture capital next year when their bets are not paying off. They're going to be a little more skeptical. But it comes down to, if we have the metrics, we have the revenue, we're going to be able to raise from venture capital because there is always someone willing to invest in something that's working. Just like you can find banks easy when people are paying the rents. When they're not paying the rents, that's when you don't get the money. That's when you got to go back to mom for the balloon note. When they're paying the rent, you can go get a low interest rate from the biggest firm in the world because you've de-risked it.
So I'll close with this. There's the horse, the jockey, knowing who you're investing in, all of those things make a lot of sense. I think one of the reasons that Ian and David had an easier time raising capital now is also this. The process is better. We're further along, but smart investors and people who know these guys also know this. In a recession, the second most valuable asset that most people own is their car. We're going to get it. If you look at the statistics in recessions, and the timing is perfect here, the average age of the car owned by America goes up in recessions because people protect and keep. They buy a new set of tires and change the oil. They don't go buy a new car. They put $800 into the car and they just keep riding that damn thing into the ground. What we're doing here, and I think people, I don't know if you got this direct feedback, I thought about it, like protect. And then the other thing happens in recessions a lot of times, people start doing irrational shit. Like people don't have jobs. They start ripping things off. So people need to protect their cars because there's a need. This all comes together in a confluence. It was the reason why when Ian said, hey, we're raising capital, I'm like, I'm in. And I was willing to give him more than he asked for because I think the timing is right for this. And I think we're in an exciting time for the product.
I think you're right. I think the problem's only growing. There aren't any solutions out there that we think are superior to what we're trying to do. So it's going to be a fun couple of years. And for me personally, it's gratifying. I can't wait to just share what we're going through over the next couple of years and all the things that, all the challenges that we're having to overcome with my friends who are now part owners with me, which is really cool. Maybe next time we have to disappoint a bunch of customers, I'll give Frank 50 people to call for me. Hey, Frank, you need you to make some calls. You're an owner.
I'll outsource it.
The more equity I give Frank, the more I'm going to start bringing Cava companies in on the mix. Like, hey, can I borrow that lead source generator you got?
Hey, before Ian asks for likes and whatnot, the only thing that would make me more happy than getting a Keep device in the mail is more baseball cards.
More crappy baseball cards. I can't wait for you to tell me how they look, homie. Hey, so if you are new to our podcast, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. And if you are a longtime listener, quit making me beg. Give me that 5-star review with some choice comments.
We're on fire, baby. We got all kinds of new reviews flying in.
6 of them in September, crushing it. Frankie, good hanging out with you, dude.
Always a pleasure, Ian.